Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, a good day, wherever you are. Welcome to the release of AmCham Shanghai's China Business Report and a panel discussion on China business climate. My name is Xiaohua Yang, Professor of International Business and Director of China Business Studies Initiative, also called CBSI, at the University of San Francisco. We are very honored to co-host today's event with AmCham Shanghai, or called American Chamber of Commerce, Shanghai, which is one of the oldest chamber in Shanghai with 108 years history under its belt. University of San Francisco is 166 years old, Jesuit University in San Francisco, with a long historical connection to China and Asia. CBSI, launched in 2014, is the San Francisco Silicon Valley-based thought leader knowledge hub and relationship builder for businesses connecting the US, China, Asia, and the rest of the world. And today, I believe it is a quite anticipated event for many of us. I'm personally very excited to learn about what we have discovered in the report. So we will start with a presentation on the findings in the AmCham Shanghai's 2021 annual China Business Report from Mr. Kurt Gibbs, the president of AmCham Shanghai, and followed by a panel discussion. We will leave some time for you, the audience, for question and answer. And please type your questions in the question answer. So I'm going to hand it over to Kurt because this is really the meat part of the event, and look forward to hearing from Kurt. Kurt, it's your floor now.
Great, thank you very much, Professor Yang. It's my pleasure to be here, actually here in my hometown of San Francisco. We were originally planning to do this together with the University of San Francisco. We were going to do this as a physical offline event, and I was very much looking forward to that. Circumstances changed, and of course, we're not going to be able to do that, but it's great to have so many people joining us here via Zoom. Let's see, and I also want to thank in advance my all the panelists that have come to have a robust discussion about what's going on in China, because this is very important, because our perspective is that China has been really so much in the news. It really dominates the headlines, and frankly, the headlines are always negative, and there are negative things happening in China today. There are issues that the business community has to face, but that's not the whole story. And I hope everybody did hear my thanks to PwC, because they've been a hardworking partner with us on this survey. And the way we do this survey, by the way, we do this every year. We have about 50 to 60 questions that we ask our members. We do add different questions from time to time because it's such a dynamic environment that the questions that we ask our members should change from time to time. But we have a certain number of questions that we keep as a baseline. That way we can have a historical comparison, especially when we're talking about things like revenue and profit. First of all, just more about the survey. We had 338 members responding. That's a lot less than our total number of members. So looking at our AmCham Shanghai, as Professor Yang gave us that nice introduction, we do have a long history. We also have a lot of members. We've got 3,000 members in China. But for the survey, we are very specific. We only ask our corporate members. We don't ask our individual members to respond to this, and we also don't ask our non-resident members. We do have quite a few non-resident members that are members of AmCham Shanghai so that they can get access to our publications and content, but they aren't resident in China. And for the purpose of this survey, we're only operating companies that are operating in China. And we only asked, we wanted one responder per company so that we don't have, an enormous company that has, hundreds of employees. And if they all respond to the survey, we're going to get skewed results. So we only ask the CEO or CFO to respond to the survey, and that's how we get 338 members. So the survey itself, we're going to go through kind of the top line overall business performance. And you're going to see that most of our member companies are actually quite bullish on China and optimistic about the future. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the barriers to operating in China, increased competition, various other things that are happening within the market, within the regulatory environment, and hopefully that's going to be a catalyst to spur the discussion that we'll have with our panelists immediately after. Also, one other thing. We will go ahead and share the entire report with people who are attending this event today. And I think maybe at the end, Titi Bakam, who runs our government relations group in Shanghai, maybe she can tell us at the end how attendees can get a hold of their very own copy in PDF form of the entire report. So with that, let's talk about really the top line result here really is all about the bullishness and return to optimism. So one of the questions that we ask, a key question that we ask our members is, how do you look at the next 5 years? What's the business outlook in China? And historically, again, this is one of those questions that we ask the same question in the same way year after year so that we can get a good reliable baseline. We've consistently been in the high 70s, low 80s in terms of the percentage of our members that say they are fundamentally optimistic about the 5-year outlook for their business in China. That had we came to an abrupt halt. In the last 2 years, we saw a precipitous drop in the optimism level. Now, that was largely due to during the Trump administration, we had that trade war. That took about 20 points off the optimism level. And it's hard to say, was it the trade war or was it the volatility? Was it the uncertainty of U.S. policy? Probably all of the above. And then last year, of course, we were coming out of the trade war with the new administration in place, but then we had COVID. So the last 2 years, we've had a real drop in that optimism level. That's back. So again, this year, net optimism level, 78%. This year, our members said they are fundamentally optimistic about the 5-year outlook. So we're back to that level. Second, looking at China as a high priority for the majority of our members. And 55% see China as a top 3 priority. That's even higher when we look at different sectors, particularly our retail members really see China as a top 1 priority. And that's on the back of the strong growing consumer sector within China, the growing middle class and the buying power that China's consumers have. But what is it that American companies are really after? Clearly, it's the growth potential in the market itself. It's not cheap labor. It's not any of those things. It's all about the growth potential in the market itself. And that's really across the board, whether we're talking about consumer-facing businesses or B2B, chemicals, all of that. Companies are recovering. Recovering from COVID. This year's survey results are very much about recovery and recuperation from COVID. On the revenue line, 2020 certainly saw us take a hit on revenues. So about 50% of our only 50% of our members reported that they saw revenue growth in 2020. Now that's in comparison to sort of a historical average of much closer to the 60s, 65% would typically be seeing revenue growth. So that was certainly a hit that a lot of companies took in 2020. In particular, our retail businesses saw a dip in their typical growth that they enjoy for 2020. Automotive and retail both really were down in 2020, but 2021, if we look at what we're looking at going forward, 82% of our, 82% of our businesses expect 82% of our businesses expect to see revenue growth in 2021 over 2020. So that's the revenue picture. I'll also say a word about the profit picture. So profit is actually quite interesting. 77% of our member companies reported that they were profitable in 2020. And that's interesting. That's actually a reflection that most of our businesses were able to pivot quite well into 2020 and be able to reduce their costs in order to still remain profitable. In particular, on the upside, our food and agriculture businesses did very well in terms of their profitability in 2020. That was largely on the back of the successful trade agreement that had large agricultural purchases as part of that. So food and agriculture did quite well profitably on the profit line. So they got good price, enjoyed good increase in prices in 2020. The other sector that did very well was in electronics, especially non-consumer electronics, and that would be on the back of COVID in 2020 with all of the emphasis on digital and work for home, et cetera. So our electronics businesses were actually quite profitable. Let's keep going. Also, we like to be able to compare. We ask our members to compare the China growth and China opportunities to what they are seeing worldwide. And China is consistently a more attractive market growth-wise than the global growth rates that most of our members are looking at. So again, these are the reasons why China is such an important market to American businesses. So investment in China aims to capture a growing market. So investment, looking at 2020, we did see a dip in investment. The COVID clearly had an impact, especially on retail and automotive. Those were two that stopped investing in 2020. So the question becomes, what are member companies, what are the American companies actually investing in? And overall, they're very much investing in sort of customer acquisition, sales, marketing. That's really the number one investment area. Also in digital. So digital, no surprise. And within digital, here's how all the different types of digital investments rank. So again, virtual, remote work. This is the number one area where American companies are investing. And this, I think we should get into more discussion about digital when we get into our panel discussion, because it's a really big topic. When we talk about domestic competition against domestic companies, one of the things that comes up consistently is that domestic companies are two things. One, they tend to be faster to market. And number two, they tend to adopt digital technologies faster than American companies do. And I think that's an interesting topic to get into, and I look forward to getting some input from our panelists on that particular topic. Now, here comes the, so Austin, if we could go ahead to the next one. Next slide. This is the controversy. This is where we start talking about some of the issues in U.S.-China relations and some of the questions around what's going on with American businesses. Are companies, pulling out of China? Are we decoupling from China, especially around some of the supply chains within the COVID? In the COVID times, there was a lot of discussion about over-reliance on China as a supplier. There was a lot of discussion about that. And our survey this year really puts a lot of that discussion to rest. In other words, when we asked our members of those for whom this question is relevant, meaning if they're manufacturing in China, are you planning to stop manufacturing in China or pull your manufacturing out of China? 72% said no. we have no plans to move any of our production out of China within the next 3 years. Then that remains, the 28% left. There's a pretty big spread in terms of what companies are planning to do. Some of them are planning to move some of their production, but mainly they're moving to either Southeast Asia or to India or to Mexico. And here's another key point when we ask specifically, how many of these companies are planning to reshore production back to the United States? 0. So that's literally not happening. So the whole reshoring is not happening. We're seeing some adjustment in supply chains, but it's largely cost driven. Now, that's not to say that people aren't concerned. They are concerned about decoupling and some of the issues around technology sharing, but there is no mass movement to exit China or to move production entirely out of China. That's not happening. And there's a real reluctance, in fact, to decouple from China as a production base for all kinds of reasons, having largely to do with the sophistication of the manufacturing ecosystem there in China. And again, it's really not about cheap labor. So let's go ahead to the next slide. Austin, thanks. This really talks about a domestic competition. And this is really a huge issue for companies. In fact, when we asked our member companies, what's on the mind of your headquarters? So when you're having conversations with your headquarters, either at the board level, executive level, what do they think about China? And really, it's domestic competition that is very high on the list of things to be concerned about. So it's a top 3 concern for the executive team at the headquarters, second only after U.S.-China tension. Also, local executives certainly concerned about that, and domestic competition a serious hindrance to business. Now, this is kind of an interesting point that we talk about a fair bit at the chamber, and it's both domestic competition and the fact that Chinese companies are really coming up in terms of their competitiveness. It's both a reason to not be in China. It's also a reason to be in China. So in other words, there are companies who look at the domestic competitors and say, certain products or certain services are not going to be competitive against their local competitors, and so they might not bring a certain product into market. On the other hand, we also see, especially among our multinational companies, say, look, it's not an option to not be in China would be a huge mistake. Why? Because that's where our next global competitor is coming from. And so if we don't go to them, they're going to come to us. And so the fact that a lot of Chinese companies are really coming up in their competitiveness is itself a reason to be in the China market. This talks about one of the other big issues. So the 3 big issues, really, U.S.-China tension, domestic competition, and the war for talent. Both the cost and difficulty of getting talent. So this is a fairly long-term trend in the China market, that the multinational companies are not necessarily the most attractive employers to the Chinese talent. So again, we've split the slide here to Chinese talent on the left and foreign national expatriate talent on the right, because it's different issues. Really, what we're seeing is Chinese talent, domestic talent, and again, most American companies are highly localized and predominantly hire local people, really top to bottom of their organizations, and unfortunately, we as a community of businesses are becoming less competitive, and the Chinese talent see personal career advancement to be more attractive with local companies than they do foreign companies. And that's a long-term trend that's been happening for a while. Now you have to ask yourself, what is it about the career advancement? Is it my personal opinion is it's not that there's a glass ceiling over on the multinational side. I don't think that's the case. My view is, and again, let's talk about this with the panel. It's to me, it's more about efficiency in decision making. So again, back to speed. Operational speed is a competitive advantage, and local companies tend to do things just faster and in a more nimble way than their multinational counterparts, and that translates into managers able to achieve their objectives, and if they achieve their objectives, they get career advancement. So that's really the perception there. On the foreign side, it's really about COVID. The travel restrictions for COVID have had a significant impact on our member companies and their ability to get expats and their families into China, and this has been a problem for the last 2 years, and it looking into 2022. Our expectation is that it's probably going to continue to be a problem. And again, we've had a lot of conversations with the Chinese government about this, the zero tolerance approach to managing COVID. We have a lot of things that we say positively about how China has controlled COVID, both with their extremely efficient rapid testing and contact tracing. It's been quite remarkable, in fact, how China has managed to control COVID. But one of those measures is controlling especially inbound travel from international destinations, and so that's had a big impact on our member companies. So this takes you through the issues. What are the challenges, the regulatory challenges that hinder business for American companies that are operating in China? Now, here again, IPR protection and enforcement. This continues to be a problem for member companies. There has been a lot of progress made in this, and the Phase 1 trade agreement did address this. So it's moving in a good direction, but it's really still not where it needs to be. And we are hearing from member companies that they do limit the technologies that they bring into the China market. And then, as we talked about already, domestic competition is fierce. And so if they're not competing with their best products and best technologies, that's a problem. So IP protection is an issue. Data localization and other cybersecurity requirements. This has been confusing for a lot of foreign companies. It's also, the data localization law is going to be, which has just been implemented, will impose large costs on companies as they have to replicate their IT systems. So those are all issues. And down the left, you can see a variety of other areas where foreign companies do feel at a disadvantage. Dual circulation. This is an interesting one, and we talk a lot with our European colleagues to get their perspective on it. And there is a lot of disagreement in the market in terms of what it really means, how it's going to be impacting our businesses. There are companies out there that think, yes, it's going to further restrict the market opportunities for foreign companies in the China market, and it's an indication that China is turning inward. Our members, on the other hand, the majority of them are taking very much a wait and see view towards dual circulation. So there's a lot of this is a lot to digest in the market. China has released dual circulation. They've now more recently they've been talking about common prosperity, which we're all trying to figure out exactly what direction that's going to take. then also China's policy regarding putting some limits on a lot of the big tech companies. So there's a lot going on in China in terms of the regulatory environment and various shifts that are taking place. So it's a very interesting and dynamic landscape. When we talk about COVID, it's really just the travel restrictions that are the problem. In China today, yes, you do have, we've put up a mask there on the right for you to get that sense that, yeah, I mean, masks are still mandatory in a lot of the places, especially some of the transportation checkpoints. We do have a thorough and rigorous contact tracing system within China. But again, these are things that don't really impact business performance, and the foreign business community overwhelmingly is supportive of these measures, and frankly don't really see them as overly draconian or an invasion of privacy or these kinds of things. They're simply effective, and they've helped us to recover our businesses. Having said that, on the travel restrictions are what are continuing to cause difficulty and having an impact on our operations. This is one we asked specifically about. What are global boards and global headquarters? What are they saying in the U.S. about China? And what's interesting here is some of our members actually declined to answer, but of the companies that did answer, a majority of them said yes. We are looking at rebalancing assets away from China now. Let's be careful. Rebalancing is we worded that very carefully. Rebalancing is not exiting the market. It is not abandoning the market. It's simply looking at where the revenues are coming from and where our investment is, and making sure that they are balanced in terms of the global opportunity. So 80% said yes. Their boards are asking those kinds of questions. The obvious follow-on question, why? Certainly, the top concern is U.S.-China relations. Also in that category, though, is domestic competition and the overall cost structure. So those are also concerns that we hear from global headquarters and global boards. So this is sort of the good news, bad news slide. In terms of what's the upside? What are the factors that are really going to be helping us in terms of tailwinds and give us cause for optimism in the next 3 to 5 years? What could change that would really benefit our businesses? Again, very top, improved U.S.-China relations. That's something that all of our members are really hoping for, and that's really what would smooth the way for greater growth. Consumer market. We've talked about that already. It's the growing middle class and buying power of consumers. That's going to be giving our businesses tailwind, especially in consumer-facing businesses, healthcare, autos, across the board. You will notice that let's see, IP infringement is there. You'll notice removal or reduction of tariffs is actually fairly low down the list. And again, now that the tariffs are down around, the blended average is around 18% now, as far as sort of the residual trade war tariff rates. And what we've learned about tariffs in the last 2 years or so is two things. I mean, one is that business finds a way. When you impose tariffs on goods, businesses find a way around those things, and it hasn't really had we're certainly not in favor of tariffs, and we had conversations with the Trump administration and the Biden administration about that, but they haven't really had the extreme debilitating effect on our business community in general. We also learned that the tariff rate matters. In other words, a 10 to 15% tariff rate
can largely be absorbed within price adjustments and margin. But when you get up to about a 25% tariff, that's really when things have to change. And right now, again, as I mentioned, the blended tariff rate is down around 18%. So it's not a huge problem for our community. Barriers to the bad news side, the right side of the slide, domestic competition, U.S.-China relations, labor costs, right down the board. And again, this will be a good slide to refer to when we get into our panel discussion. Overall, the picture is really that the American businesses in China are really committed to the market, committed to their strategy. They expect revenue from China to grow faster than their worldwide revenue over the next 3 to 5 years. So it's a very optimistic outlook. Most of our businesses are not planning to make major changes in their investment strategy. We do need to talk, though, quickly about consumer boycotts, because that's where there's a little bit of unbalance. There we do see some concern, especially. Well, two things. Overall, we did ask, overall members are not concerned about consumer boycotts. So only 6.5% of our members said that it was an issue at all. My take on that is most businesses don't think they have a problem. And because if they thought they had a problem, then they'd fix it. And so these kinds of things, it's never a problem until it's a problem. So most of our businesses don't think that a consumer boycott is likely. Retailers, on the other hand, the number is different. So about 30% of our retailers, and this is clearly a reaction to what's happened with the H&M situation earlier this year. And again, so retailers are more concerned about that possibility. And 13% of our retailers, in fact, said that they had made adjustments to their investment decisions in light of the potential for consumer boycotts. So good. So I'm going to end there. And we're going to go into our panel discussion. And but before we do that, I would like to invite Elsie Pan from PwC to just say a couple words about PwC, and just because they've been such a great partner for us. They put a tremendous amount of work into this. The survey is ours, and we're responsible for the accuracy of it. It's a survey of our members, but PwC puts a lot of applies their brain trust to help us to analyze the numbers and also come up with these great graphics. So I really do appreciate what PwC does for us. So I'll hand back to you, Professor Yang. But then maybe we want to have Elsie just say a couple words.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Very delighted to be here with you all today. My name is Elsie Pan. I'm a partner based out of a New York office. So I serve the role of consulting leader of Asian Financial Services, working collaboratively with our partners in Asia, including Gabriel Wang, PwC China inbound outbound business leader, who hosted this event 16 hours ago in China. Mm-hmm. So in 2019, which will be known as 1BC, so before COVID, I co-presented a similar PwC co-branded business report with China General Chamber of Commerce at the Select USA Investment Summit in DC. So this time we're very proud to be the knowledge partner with AmCham on the collaboration of this report in the 5th year. A big shout out to the participants of this survey. Thank you. At PwC, our purpose is to build trust in society and deliver sustained outcome. And perhaps nowhere do we have greater opportunities to fulfill this purpose than in helping global firms address cross-border matters, particularly given today's U.S.-China relation. So our resident China specialists in the U.S., augmented by a unique acceleration center located in Shanghai, China, owned and managed by PwC US, are teaming with our PwC China partners to help hundreds of US companies bring their China strategies to life. So our resident China specialists consist of former US regulators who have worked extensively with their counterparts in China, US lawyers by trade who have worked on high-profile China nexus cases, senior business leaders who served leadership roles in China, along with the technologists, data scientists, statisticians who have detailed knowledge because they put in hundreds of thousands of hours working on China-US cross-border matters. So needless to say, PwC China teams are well connected with our US teams on all fronts. As a global network, we will invest $12 billion over the next 5 years, attracting 100,000 talents to accelerate in serving our global clients in the areas of cloud, digital, cybersecurity, data privacy, ESG, just to name a few. Those are all the themes in the report. For example, one of the global technology companies headquartered in the US is making deliberate efforts in meeting the US export control and sanctions compliance requirements for its business in China. So our secret weapon, our talents, trade compliance professionals located in China who have been working with the US consultants for years on this matter enabled us to start addressing this needs in a matter of days. So our US resident China specialists bring a deep bench of 80,000 professionals in the #1 and #2 economies in the world to help global firms seize opportunities, navigate disruptions, mitigate risks, articulate their brand, stay in a competitive position, and preserve their ability to operate and grow. So we look forward to engaging you on these trends highlighted in this report and discussing how we can support your long-term growth in China and globally. So enjoy the rest of the session. Thank you so much, Professor Yang and Kirk.
Thank you, Elsie, for coming to this session to actually be acknowledged. I want to thank Kerr and his team and the PwC for producing a tremendously, valuable, informative report and sharing with our audience. So thank you, Kerr. Thank you, Elsie. Let's now move to the next part of today's event. That is the panel discussion. We are very fortunate to have invited 5 panelists today to discuss actually some of the findings and their expertise areas. So let me just briefly introduce, when I say your name, just raise your hand so people know. And yes, your name is here as well. So Don Williams, partner at Hogan Lavelle International, and Hao Ling, head of MNC Business Development, Alibaba Cloud, US. Peter Lorenzen, professor and the director of MS Applied Economics Program, University of San Francisco. And Peter is also on my CBSI executive board. Vivian Wan, international tax partner, US, inbound practice leader for Deloitte. Vivian is actually CBSI's chair emeritus. She has chaired our advisory board for 3 years. Of course, Kerr I have introduced. So let's move to this part. I have prepared a number of questions for the panelists. And those of you in the audience, please type your question if you have any reaction to them, to their answers. And so, first of all, once again, congratulations for producing such an amazing report. And there's definitely tons of food for thought in this report. And there are a lot of surprises too. And even I was surprised, being bombarded by US, Western media, all the time. And now see this report, this seems just paint a quite different stories, different pictures for all of us. So this is a great. I'm so happy that you're doing this annually, and I salute to you for doing this. So let me move to my first questions. based on the findings in the report that Kerr just presented, I want to know your reactions in terms of opportunities, challenges, and risks for American companies, particularly those that are interested in entering the China market now amid broad US-China tensions and global pandemic. And this question is for all the panelists. So each one of you gets 2 minutes to address this question. I'll start with Don. Don?
My clients are mostly in the technology sector. And so what they experience is very focused in that area. I think the difficulties that they face in China, and these are not directly related to US-China tensions perhaps, but are mostly on the regulatory side at the moment. There's a lot of uncertainty across the technology sector in terms of a rapidly changing regulatory environment in China. Everything from crackdown on VIE companies to education, ed tech sector regulation changes and so forth. I think broadly speaking, you could see this as a sign of China turning inward, being less concerned about sort of international norms and how regulatory changes in China are going to be perceived overseas. And of course, there's a domestic political agenda underpinning all of it, but for my clients from the US and elsewhere, foreign companies, they present significant challenges. I think on the opportunity side, Kerr has well presented the opportunities presented by the market, being in China for the market and the growth of the market, in China for China, in China so you can compete with the best in some of the rising sectors, and needing to be in this huge market in order to be internationally competitive. Those are the opportunities, or at least the reasons why you have to be here, despite the challenges.
Hi, this is Hal. I think that's a very interesting question. And Don just talked a lot about the regulatory part, so I'm not going to repeat that. I think in my daily conversations with my customers, we also talk about the similar challenges, right, on the regulatory side. I think on the opportunity side, it's very interesting that the report pointed out that two of the largest area of investments by companies, virtual working and digital marketing, and then in addition, there's the biggest area for growth in the investment, are data for supply and demand management, as well as CRM and sales automation, right? So this is very interesting because everything points to really understanding your customers better, right? I think the Chinese consumers want to be catered to. They want just-in-time marketing and merchandising, purchasing opportunities. They want to feel special, right? So I think it's important to understand this customer kind of psychological dynamic, and really go into it with eyes wide open, right? I think one of the hot topics, and we'll talk about later probably, is digital transformation. If you're a company just entering China, don't get to a position to need to transform, be digital first, and that's really one of the things that we talk to a lot of companies about. Leverage the opportunity, to be front and center, to get that mind share, right? So I think there are certainly risks. There are certainly challenges. I also talked to one of the big fintech companies this week based in the US, and they're just working with the regulators, who call them out, right? And because they're a US-based fintech company, so there are some scrutinies. But I think the good part is the regulators are being clear with what they want, and really, if you follow and again, Don, well put, right? In China for China strategy, then the roads will be a lot less challenging. So thank you.
Thank you, Hao. it sounds like what you said, that the opportunity in China is certainly, abundant opportunity, but you need to be in China for China, and you want the consumers to feel special, which is an interesting point. 35 years ago, I really felt special as a consumer in the US, but I no longer feel that way. Today, like AT&T could, basically roll you over. They no longer treat you as a valuable consumer anymore. But China looks like, at least at this point in time, they're still feeling like, they need to treat customers as special. And so that's a very good point. Thank you so much. Let me move to Peter. Peter.
Well, I think my main reaction to the report, I'm not in the nitty gritty of business, so I want to dive in there because we have some great experts in that area. But I did find it encouraging to see what, a generally positive picture about, businesses are continuing to engage there. We saw very little evidence of decoupling. I mean, there's there's always some churn, and some companies that are going to, shift some operations here and there, but there's nothing like the sort of big picture story that some people have been either worrying about or even advocating, that somehow the countries are going to go their separate ways. I think practically we've always known that wasn't possible, and so this just reemphasizes that, both at the company level and at the corporate level, everyone's going to have to continue to have a strategy to find ways to work together and engage as best they can. It's going to be hard, but honestly, I mean, I've been dealing with business in China since the 90s, and it's never been easy. Maybe some people thought it was going to get a lot easier, a lot faster, but there clearly still are challenges, both at the macro political level and down at the sort of micro regulatory and business level. But that's kind of true everywhere.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, looks like a localization might address some of those issues in China for China. I like what Don said. So let me move to Vivian. Vivian, what are some of the reactions?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Yang, and certainly be happy to be here. The report is very encouraging, and it's somewhat echoed to Deloitte's economist report came out back in May as well on China. So we have fairly consistent message here. China's still going to be very important market for multinational companies. I'm sitting in Silicon Valley, even though I'm overseas the US practice related to US-China. Now in Silicon Valley, mainly technology company, yes, there are huge debate, especially at board level, what each company needs to do, how to deal with China from a reputational perspective, all the way down to operational and strategy perspective. I think for large companies, I think more and more companies accept the reality localization or decoupling to a certain extent is inevitable. So strategy needs to be put forward as to how to manage that. And that is not just China policy, to a certain extent as US export control or US regulatory environment as well. So some of those solutions company has come up is not only addressing China market, it could be addressing some other global market for those multinational companies as well. So with respect to smaller tech companies, I would say they probably only have energy to deal with one versus the other. So certainly they have to be facing a pick and choose situation. Do you want Chinese investor? You want an American investor? Do you want to restructure? So we have been very busy to help companies navigating that process, but I think transaction flow continue to be extremely strong. So I don't see any slowing down in terms of cross-border investments. Now in the consumer product area, I would say China's become an even more important marketplace. I have two very interesting fashion clients, fashion product clients, and geared towards energy efficient or renewable sort of materials for purses, fashion products for professional women. Wow, China, the sort of middle class growth of middle class as well as working women population, huge market for both of them, and they really capitalize this by leveraging new media platform entering into China. So I do think the report really spot on and really echoes, based upon my experience in terms of the reactions in the business world.
Okay, Vivian, thank you so much. Since I'm having you here, I'm going to actually dive a little bit deeper with you here, okay? Yes, as I mentioned, so many of us being bombarded by the daily news about the shifts in China's regulation. If it is not about the Didi or Alibaba, it is about Evergrande. And however, the findings in the report actually seem to portray so different pictures. As you just said, it's, even in your own Deloitte report, and I actually read another report, that's European Chamber's report. The pictures are very different, and not, it's, our media almost feel, make us feel like everyone's, packing up, leaving China now, but that's not the case, right? Over 50% of the companies surveyed in this report do not seem to believe the regulatory changes have actually hindered their operations. So for those of us in the US, are we really making a mountain out of a molehill, given China's ever-changing regulatory environment? What are some of the areas, particularly, referring to international tax areas, of some of the major differences in this regulatory, area that you would advise the American companies which are interested in entering the China market? What should they know?
Yeah. Yep. So thank you for that question. So I'm an international tax partner at Deloitte. So tax is my world. I just participated a few days ago, the Pacific Rim Tax Institute presentation, along with Australian, Japan, and Indian tax authority talking about policies, etc. So interesting enough, China in the last 2 years is amongst few countries have least amount of tax law changes. It's for those of you, if you familiar with OECD, there has been flourish of new actions coming out, whether or not from a digital tax to action 1, action 2, etc. So from a regulatory perspective, I think China, most of the US multinational companies are much more focused on IP issues. Certainly around dual circulation, what kind of policy it will come out, but less specifically on tax. More tax strategies or policies China has rolled out in the recent period is more enhancing more of an incentive to attract investments, more incentives for certain industries. So I and then of course their own sort of VAT and tariff policies to counterbalance the trade conditions with the U.S., whether or not it's giving incentive for exporters or just more of a sort of a trade war type of penalty, duty, etc. So in terms of suggestions for companies entering to China, I would say if you're new going to China and really going for market opportunities and not necessarily for capital sort of investment, still keep it relatively simple. China still a somewhat control from a foreign exchange perspective. So to the extent can arrange your business operation at the initial stage as lean as possible and allow cash repatriation in the most efficient way. And because there are uncertainties and there's complexity. So keep it simple and straightforward. That will be very important to manage. Of course, if you are much larger companies, then it's not, the regulation issue is much more multifaceted. So it's not necessarily one particular issue. So many of the projects that we're involved in is really thinking through a variety of supply chain issues to manage US-China relationship as well as the policy changes.
Thank you so much for the detailed answer. Thank you. I hope it's very helpful to those who are considering going to China. And let me now move to Dawn for another question. So over the years, the IP environment in China appears to have improved. The findings in this report corroborates this kind of trend. And you are on the ground in China. I know you're quarantined in Shanghai now, working in the 160 square feet rooms. Hope you enjoying it. And you might see things very differently. So what are your clients saying in China IP environment, and how is it shaping their China strategies?
Well, thank you, Professor Young. Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a perfect environment by any means, and the China's IP environment has been discussed extensively in the U.S. media, and like many discussions in that media, it's probably overblown, but it is not a perfect place for IP protection. That said, I think if we look at the trends over the last 5 years, what we do see is continued improvement. I think you can divide this, the sort of analysis in two areas. You look at the regulatory environment, and then you look at the actual on the ground infringement. And I think if you look at the data, what you see is gradual improvement in both areas over the last 5 years, which is not to say that it's perfect by any means. It's not. It's still a tough place to do business from an IP perspective, and everybody knows that. But I think the most important thing to note is improvement. It would be a lot different story if it were actually getting worse. It's not. It's getting better. So I think what we see is a gradual decline in the concern of AmCham members about the IP regulatory environment if you look at the past 5 years. And you also see infringement as an operational concern declining. And I think you see that if you look at the top 3 HQ concerns, headquarters concerns about China, IP doesn't even make the top 3 this year. Now, maybe that's partly because there are some other bigger concerns that are new, relatively speaking, like the U.S.-China tensions and COVID. But that is still, I think, a major statement that IP doesn't even make the top 3 HQ concerns. And I think if you look on the regulatory side, the data is supported by what we see. For example, China has new special IP courts in Guangzhou, Guangzhou, Beijing, and Shanghai. And those IP courts, if you look at the data, as we did with some other folks a year or two ago, what we see is the foreign companies win in those courts almost as much as Chinese companies. So one of the concerns about the regulatory environment is always it's impossible to win in Chinese IP court. Now, this partly depends on who you're going against, right? If you're up against a major state-owned enterprise, your chances may be worse. But on average, foreign companies win almost as much as Chinese companies in those new special IP courts, and that's a good sign, and it reflects the ongoing improvement. And so, from a strategy perspective, what you see is, if you look at the survey, this year's survey shows that in terms of doing R&D in China, which it's a major consideration for foreign companies, is what kind of R&D do you want to do in China, and how much do you want to do? But what you see is year over year for each of the last 5 years, those companies that say that IP concerns are holding us back from putting R&D in China is declining, which is not to say they don't have concerns, but it's to say that each year over the last 5 years, those who are concerned about it, the percentage is declining. So all this, I think, is good news. And if the improvement continues, the environment will be gradually getting better for foreign companies, U.S. companies.
Thank you, Don, for providing a very balanced view. I have a lot of questions for you, but I'm run out of time, so I'm going to have to move to the next one. Next one, I would like Hao-Ling to address. Being in Silicon Valley, San Francisco high-tech innovation ecosystem, we are all immensely interested in the tech world in China, especially the digital technology area. Digital transformation seems to be a hot topic in China, while it's not really a new concept. The report shows the chamber member companies have significantly increased in their investment in digital technology, as Ke showed us earlier. It is an area hardly any company can avoid to ignore. And you are running Alibaba Cloud based in US and work for a Chinese tech giant. And you have the understanding few of us have. In your view, how is digital transformation different in China? What lessons can we learn from those companies that have executed the digital transformation successfully?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Yang. I think that's a great question. And yes, digital transformation is looking a little different in China. I think just like you said, it's not a new concept. But COVID really accelerated the growth of digital transformation in China. A lot of companies had to, out of necessity, transform themselves in doing business in a completely different way, right? I have not my direct customer, but somebody in the Alibaba ecosystem. They run small jewelry stores, and they have about 100 storefronts in all over China. COVID shut everything down, right? So they had no business. So what they did was that each sales associate of those stores decided to adopt an Alibaba unified communication system. I won't go into the details of that, but leveraged that and started their own live streaming channels so that you're selling your jewelries as if you're in the stores, but online, right? So this is actually one of the few things that I noticed with digital transformation in China is that it doesn't need to be high tech and it doesn't need to be a big project, right? We have literally about 200 to 300 salespeople on their phones at home and talking to their customer base. Trying to keep their businesses going, and really during the pandemic, and it was a 2 to 3 month shutdown, in China last year, their sales actually increased, right? So I think there are a couple of things to understand about digital transformation, in China. Number one, sometimes actually not sometimes. Last year, a lot of it were driven out of necessity. Right, so they had to make changes quickly, not a lot of them, not all of them, had to be high tech. Not all of them had to be big projects, but some, leverage the technology capabilities to keep going. Right, if you think about live streaming as a phenomenon that really blew up last year, during COVID, it really essentially democratizes marketing. If you think about it, right? Historically, big companies with big marketing budgets, got in front of the consumers, right? But last year, I think live streaming had been a thing for a couple of years, but last year it really took off. And that really allowed people, small merchants and individuals, an opportunity to showcase to the world their goods and services, and got a following for it, right? So I think, I'm not an expert. I think we have, some panelists, that actually might be digital transformation experts, but I'll tell you my experience. So I would say, doing digital transformation in China, there are a few things that are important. Number one is know your objective. I think that's a very important thing. You got to know what you want to accomplish, and then you can plan for that. That's number one. Because it's important to when you're trying to do data-driven transformation, and that's one of the things that's very unique about digital transformation in China is a lot of times the objective is to allow your business to be run by data. Okay, so know your objective so that you know how to acquire data, and then that data, that analytics and that insight can help you run your business. And then I talked about doesn't have to be too big, doesn't have to be high tech, right? And then the third thing is, you have to understand, once you change the way you run your business, through a transformation, you have to transform people as well. So that's actually a shortfall that a lot of companies in China ran into, when they're undergoing a digital transformation project, and they realize that, well, my company and the way that I do business have changed, but my people haven't changed, and that really creates a problem. And then the last one is, and this is very particular to China, because it moves so fast, is that it's ongoing, right? So once you make one or more changes, to your business in order to better cater to your consumers, like I said earlier, it might be a moving target, so know that it's ongoing. So really, a lot of the companies in China, wanting to undertake this, this effort, need to understand that, you're trying to, number one, be more data driven, and number two, once you're allowing data to tell you what to do, you have to be in a position to change your business frequently, right? So data driven, and then be agile. So I'll give you an example, and this is, I wouldn't call this an extreme example, because this is becoming a reality. We're working with, Alibaba Group is working with some of the large brands, on what we call C2B, right? Historically, we were talking about B2C, B2C, now to C2B. What does that mean? It's consumer to business. So this is a lab that we've started working with different brands on, to see, okay, what would it look like if my manufacturing, my product, my production line, my supply chain were driven by consumer demands, right? And it becomes very, very interesting, because this is a concept that will only be feasible in China because the consumer demand changes so quickly. And if you think about it, without the digital transformation framework, or the digital framework in place, a traditional company wouldn't have the ability to do so. So that's just an example of how far that things have gone in China. And it's really, really important, for you to be data driven, or for you to be agile, in order to really catch up, or sometimes even get ahead of this in this environment. Thank you, Professor Yang.
Thank you, Hao, for giving us a lot of anecdotes. I understand digital information, transformation has been happening, but normally it's believed it will take probably 5 to 10 years to have fully, digitization. But because COVID, well, almost overnight we had to. It's out of necessity. I actually did a case study recently on the international exhibition company, which used to take companies overseas for trade shows. But with COVID, all the borders are locked up. So how you can still do trade show? The only way you can do it is through digital, format. So there you go. I want to ask Peter a question. This is important, but Peter, you need to do it very short, in 1 minute or so. A Wall Street Journal headline this week reads, Xi Jinping aims to rein in Chinese capitalism, hew to Mao's socialist vision. The Western media clearly says the recent crackdown on number of sectors, including high-tech education, mainly after school tutoring and property, real estate market. I wonder if there is a side that Western media has not seen. China has been on high-speed economic development for over 4 decades. It has gone faster and faster, which has begun to hurt some of the general population, as profits drives everything, including education, health, and basic livelihood. Commentators have stated that China is more capitalistic than most Western countries. I tend to agree with that. Having lived in China, US, Australia, and I do say more capitalism in China. So thus, I wonder if its recent crackdown meant to be a hard break on a fast traveling vehicle to avoid devastating collision. High impact, yes, hurt those in the vehicle, yes, and avoid that devastating collision, maybe. Given your research and your expertise on China, is the country heading back to socialism, or is it for actually pragmatic purposes? The majority of the companies surveyed do not seem to be deterred by China's policy shifts, as we have seen in Ker's presentation. Are they just being naive, or they just simply don't say, or they just say irrelevance to their operations in China? Are there anything you see that those companies don't see?
Well, I think you've hit a lot of the high points there. I think the key thing is, obviously Xi Jinping is going to refer to Mao, and he's kind of harking back to that socialist vision when he talks about some goals like, improving, reducing social inequality, helping people who have not been as lucky or done as well under the China's transformation as others. But when he talks about Mao, I feel like it's kind of in the same way that, in America, we talk about the founding fathers and we say how great they are and how we love their values, but we're not talking about going back to like a slave-holding agricultural society where women can't vote, right? So we sort of get rid of the parts that we don't really believe in anymore, and we talk about the parts that are still values we hold. And so I think when he's talking about Mao, there's an element, part of it is, it's just about the party being central, having a central role, and then, economically being a little bit more about more equitable. But the points you made are exactly right. That the most of the objectives, I would say, of the recent sometimes startling developments in China are actually pretty reasonable or understandable, right? So concerns about controlling, the data of citizens and, that being, offshore and unaccountable, wanting to have well-regulated and stable financial markets, wanting to avoid, destabilizing housing bubbles, being concerned about like inequality and kind of the rat race among especially urban Chinese to, invest more and more into educating their kids, at the expense of a broader based functioning educational system. These are all things that really worry about in the US as well. Although the one thing I would say is that I think it's the way that they go about it is problematic. I think, first of all, it shows a certain weakness on the part of the government. One of my co-authors, Denise van der Kamp at City University of Hong Kong, has referred to this in another context as blunt force regulation. So rather than just saying, hey, let's adjust the rules so that everyone can start doing things in a different way, they just shut down entire businesses or entire sectors suddenly. And that's not actually a sign of strength. I think that's a sign of they can't. It's like sort of like when the teacher's walking around the schoolyard, the kids stop fighting when she walks near them. But then as soon as she goes away, they go back to what they're doing. And so you're powerful as long as you're looking at someone, but as soon as you go away, you have no authority and no one can't control things. And I feel like the Chinese government's often in that situation, that's a position of weakness, not of strength. And then of course, from the business perspective, as I'm sure the other people on this panel can attest, there can be any kind of rules, but you kind of want there to be rules. So you can plan around that, you can make investments and, see what happens with those investments and have some hope to forecast what's going to be approved and what's not going to be. So that's the other big issue with that. But yes, I agree. We should hear from some of the audience questions. So I'll let you get back to those. Thanks.
Thank you so much. You should advise Chinese government. So the last question I have is actually a question I dedicate to someone very special. Many of you may know our dear friend and China legend, Robert Celine. He was actually the winner of CBSI's inaugural award, 2019. He would be speaking here, but left us very suddenly recently. So it weighs in my heart, in ways in hearts of many people here who know him. In his memory, I have dedicated one question to him. In his over 40 years dealing with China, he developed the concept of China horizontal. He believed no matter how intense the relationship between the US and Chinese governments, business relationship could remain productive at the local levels. The findings in this report provide just some strong support for Bob's conviction and his belief. So my question to you is, what advice do you have for American companies operating in China or that are interested in entering the China market post-COVID, and how they can leverage local resources while avoiding falling in the crack of the ongoing trade tensions? 1 minute each person. Well, I'll start with Kerr.
Thank you for the honor of addressing the late Bob Delane's question or observation. No, the more we go, the more we realize he was absolutely right about China horizontal and the power that rests at the provincial and municipal level. One of the things I'm concerned about is when we talk about decoupling. One of the things that we sort of see is the decoupling between the national level government and the provincial level government. So we're concerned about that as far as how that plays out within the China context. And what's interesting is that here in the United States, we actually see United States horizontal, in the sense that the states are still very enthusiastic about bringing in Chinese capital. And attracting. I just had a very interesting meeting with the state of Illinois that's very interested in continuing to attract Chinese capital. But in the United States, our Constitution actually prevents states from implementing international trade policy. Trade policy specifically rests with the White House, and this is one of the things that Alexander Hamilton put in place. So it is interesting that both governments, I think, are going through this transformation in terms of that horizontal versus vertical. And I think American companies need to be mindful of that and watch that dynamic very closely so that they don't get caught in the middle.
Thank you. So locals can still dance together while the two governments can argue, right? They can fight. So let me move to Vivian. Vivian, please.
Yeah, thank you. So talking about relationship, right? So for everyone familiar with China, 关系 is critically important in the post-COVID era. Now, many of us probably stuck in the US. We can't go because visa issues or whatever others. But luckily, we already have a lot of Chinese company investing in the US, just like what Kerr has alluded to, right? Alibaba's here, many's, right? And honestly, these are relationships you can build, and honestly, a lot of time that will help you to collaborate both in the U.S. market as well as in China. Deloitte, for example, we have alliance with Ali Cloud in China, and that relationship started in Silicon Valley. So I do think think a little bit outside the box. This is a globalization, and we built relationship on both sides.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me move to Don.
I strongly agree with the horizontal relationship notion, and we see evidence of that anecdotally time and time again, where local governments in China are still trying to attract American capital, working very hard. I think, how do you develop these relationships? Organizations like AmCham can help foster them and direct you to the right folks on the ground. And I would also add that for decades, a so-called joint venture has been a preferred way of entering China and doing business in China. And today, legally, there are lots of other options. There didn't used to be, but finding a strong local partner who can help you navigate all of the sort of the challenges, is a good way, whether or not it's required legally anymore, which it isn't. It's still one of the best ways to enter into the China market is find someone you trust, that you work with, and let them and the relationship with them help you to navigate.
Thank you so much. I like what you said about AmCham. So Kerr, we welcome you to continue to partner with us locally. And let me move to Hao.
So yeah, I think I'd like to echo the previous panelists and what they said. I think having a strategy for China is very important. I deal with a lot of companies that try to leverage their global playbook for China, and that's really proven very challenging because China is just a different beast. for lack of a better word. Also, because I deal, a lot in the technology space, right? I work with companies and their technology capabilities. If you see the report, some of the regulatory challenges are around cybersecurity and data localization. So just like what Don said, having a local partner and perhaps having a local technology partner as an option, is something to consider. But overall, I think having the right partner in China to help you go to market will go a long way. So that would be my response. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hao. Last one, Peter. Peter, you actually did a special, dialogue between the president of University of San Francisco and the president of Bay Area Council back in June 1st, and specifically addressing the local to local relationship, the Bay Area to China, right? So what are your thoughts here?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I have a lot to add. These guys have given some great strategy points about how to make that happen in practice. I think just want to re-emphasize how important it is, both for the governments on both sides to, when they can, just step out of the way and let people do business when it's beneficial to both sides, which most of the time it is, and then for everyone else to keep making the effort to forge those connections and do what we can to improve the lives of the ordinary people on both sides of the Pacific.
Terrific. Thank you so much. That's a nice way of ending this panel discussion. Are you willing to stay for 5 minutes to address some of the questions in the audience?
Yeah, we have two questions. The first question is, do you expect the survey results to change in light of the Evergrande fallout? If so, how? And then the second question is, how will regional economic integration and trade agreements such as RCEP and CPTPP affect the future of American firms in China?
Okay, the first one is about the recent unfolding case of Evergrande. So what do you think? Maybe Kurt, you want to address that question?
No, I don't expect the results to change dramatically. My sense is Evergrande, it's not a systemic. Look, it's a very large developer. It's significant. My surprise in that situation is that it actually took so long, for something like this to happen. In other words, we've been sort of looking at the debt situation for multiple years, more than 1 year, multiple years. And so I think the fallout is probably going to be more on the Chinese government side, in the sense that, how could they let this happen? And, the regulators were sort of busy with these other aspects and and Evergrande let Evergrande kind of get too far forward on their skis. My sense is, it'll probably trim the growth numbers, and some of the larger companies, they could probably impact borrowing, interest rates, these kinds of things. But in terms of major shifts or changing the outlook in a big way, certainly within the real estate sector, perhaps. But in terms of the contagion to other sectors or contagion outside China, I'm not a subscriber to that particular theory.
I tend to agree with you. Same as, this is a Chinese company, and this is like the government put a sudden brake on, on the collision, right? On the car, which you might have collision. Sounds like that's a very similar situation. The government should have done early, maybe too late, Now it just causes so much ripple effect. Okay, this is from Professor William Wei from Canada. How will regional economic integration and trade agreements affect the future American firms' strategy in China? So those regional, integrations such as RCEP, CPTPP, which China has agreed to join recently, right?
I can take a crack at it. I mean, I think, and I'm sure Kerr has thoughts to add as well. I think it's a big issue for U.S. companies to be outside of these trade areas. I mean, I think RCEP was one issue. I mean, it's basically it's a tariff lowering agreement, and of course, if you're on the outside, you don't benefit from that. I think the broader CPTC agreement, which was originally structured by President Obama, I mean, was a strategy basically to. I don't think it was so much to exclude China. I think it was basically China. If you want to join, you have to do business in certain ways, but particularly reduce subsidies to your state-owned companies and so forth. But now China is ahead of the U.S. in the queue, and I think that's a bad position for U.S. companies, because if China is able to join, and the U.S. does not, the U.S. will be again on the outside. And now I actually think it's unlikely that China will successfully join because of issues like state subsidies. But that said, the U.S. really needs to get its act together on these trade agreements, from my perspective.
Let me say, if China joins successfully, and those companies, American companies in China, operating in China, they can write the China's membership, right? Even though US is not part of it, can they?
I mean, I think to a certain degree, but it depends. I mean, it depends on where you're bringing goods from, and are you manufacturing locally? And there are a lot of factors.
Technical issue. I agree with you. Yeah. So, well, given the time we actually have gone over, I know many of you already have lined up for the next appointment. So I will actually finish this session now. I want to take this opportunity to thank Ke for partnering with us. We're very honored, and for sharing the tremendous insights in your report. And it's of immense value to me and to many people here in the audience. So thank you so much for that. And I want to thank all the panelists for sharing your insights and spending time with our audience. And I want to thank all the audience, everyone in the audience for joining today. And sorry, I can't, get to everyone's question because of time, but our speakers are willing to engage with you. They have probably, some of them already have email address for you. So you can contact them individually if you have any specific question. So if those of you who are willing to put your email addresses in the chat for our audience, that would be great. And Ke has promised to share the report with you. Everyone in the audience. So we're going to send it out tomorrow, a note with the report for you as a gift for participating today. So thank you all, and have a good evening.